Hey everyone, today I'm here with Giuseppe, a student who became Trader of the Month for March with a performance of plus 46%. Hey Giuseppe, how you doing?
Hi, nice to meet you. Good afternoon. Hi, Chelsea. I'm very well, thanks.
I'm so glad you're here. First, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, your profession and your hobbies.
My name is Giuseppe. I live in Rome and am an electronics engineer, and I deal with satellite-based telecommunication systems. And in my free time, I cultivate several passions, including trading, and that's the reason why we're here together today.
Great. So, what problem did you have before you joined our program?
Well, to summarize, I had, let's say, three different problems. The first problem was low profitability, namely a relatively flat equity line, and a couple of gains, but prevalently several significant losses. And that's the first problem. The second problem was the need to be constantly in front of the screen, analyzing charts, and then making decisions based on, well, let's say, my knowledge, which was based solely on technical analysis. And it was at that time that I was forced to make decisions in real time in an environment that was certainly not comfortable, because in a tumultuous market situation, that probably isn't the best thing to do. And so that was my second problem. And the third problem was coming to terms with my emotions regarding these decisions and the actions to be taken. So, also the psychological conditioning in case the choice wasn't the best, let's say. And basically, those three issues somehow haunted my life as a trader.
So, based on what you're saying, I suppose you had a more discretionary approach, right?
Yes, absolutely. It was a discretionary approach. So it was based on the concepts of technical analysis. However, over time, sort of out of professional bias, and because of how I tend to approach situations, I felt the need to set aside the discretion and embrace a method that is replicable, as well as independent of my emotions. And that's the reason why I went and I searched on the internet and finally discovered the Unger Academy.
Okay. And what made you choose our program among the many other programs available in the market?
Well, as I said, the choice was pretty straightforward for the following reasons. Basically for two reasons. One, I was looking for precisely what the Unger Academy could offer me. See, I wanted to get away from the discretionary approach, as I mentioned earlier. So I wanted a method that was reproducible. And before I came to the Unger Academy, just to be clear, I had developed a software program that I could use to analyze my ideas and test them. It was based on technical analysis, but it was something that would somehow automate my ideas. And that prompted me to research the internet, because I wanted to find out who is the most knowledgeable person, or guru, let's say, in this specific field. And, well, there is nothing like Andrea Unger's resume. So, from the first contact with the Unger Academy, there was this immediate bond of trust. So I dove headlong into studying. And I was sure that, well, if not to succeed, I was sure at least that I had definitely found a well-structured training program.
Cool. And is there anything in our program that really helped you?
Oh, yes, several things. The first is that these concepts are, let's say, they're technical, in the sense that they are based on something scientific. And that is something that fits very well with the way that I work, even in the context of my work. So I fully embraced this idea. Now, after that, the extent and the scope of the training program, which covers every detail, it's no coincidence that the tagline is "Trader from Zero to Professional." And that's somewhat true. It is truly a comprehensive program. And then there's also the fact that a student is never left alone, because there's a dense network of very professional and trained coaches who, in addition to the weekly meetings, let's say, offer their assistance almost around the clock, even on social channels like Facebook. So whatever doubt you have, you will never find yourself alone. And this is a crucial point. At the beginning, the student has to start dealing with things that aren't very easy. So he needs to find his way in quite a tricky world. So the fact of being supported around the clock is an added value.
There's a strong sense of community here.
Absolutely.
Very nice. And what were the results after you applied what you learned in the different modules of the program?
Yes. So let's say, unlike my previous experience, I finally achieved a pretty nice equity curve. Look, I haven't been live for very long. It's about, say, 5 months. And let's say I've recorded maximum gains of 45 to 46%, obviously surrounded by drawdowns, which is something physiological in the life of a trader. However, the drawdown is entirely in line with what's expected. That is what the tests showed. And let's say that this is very encouraging because it helps you to believe in this method. So I have to say that so far I am very satisfied.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So how has your life changed since you've achieved this, both economically and in terms of your awareness?
Well, it has changed for the better for several reasons. The first reason is that there is a certain satisfaction when you see the first results, and that's good. But the most important thing is that I am no longer forced, as I said, to sit in front of the PC and frantically analyze charts and make decisions that, in most cases, turned out to be not so positive. Now, I don't have any emotional conditioning in my decisions. So even from a psychological perspective, hey, I found a great advantage. This doesn't mean that you don't have to sit in front of the PC, because, of course, the program requires intensive learning, and so you still have to spend time in front of the PC to study. But it's work that doesn't need to be done in real time on the markets. You can do it in the back office, let's say. You have to find the time to spend on it. But it's a very different situation than being forced to look at the performance of a certain stock to make a decision that you hope will be the right one. But then, in most cases, it won't be. Well, at least in my case.
A huge difference in time, energy, and everything.
Oh, yes. The biggest advantage, let's say, apart from the satisfaction of seeing the results, is the peace of mind, the psychological conditioning that is reduced to almost zero.
Awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
And where do you think you'd be now if you hadn't chosen our program?
Well, good question. At best, I would have decided to stop this activity and maybe avoid other negative results. Also, at least in my experience, the psychological conditioning that I experienced in trading, it was quite challenging. At worst, though, I might have continued to record events that didn't quite meet my expectations. But about this, as I said in the beginning, it was my very goal, in the sense that I really wanted to get away from this condition. So much so that, as I explained, I set up tools that allowed me to approach this issue. And then I found in the academy the best experts in the field. So, wow, everything was much easier.
Nice. Finally, I'd like to ask you what you would say to those watching this interview who may be undecided about joining the program.
Okay, well, I believe in it all the way. Because in my experience, it's a comprehensive and detailed program in all areas. And I'm saying that with sincerity because I'm often the first to criticize programs proposed to me that may not be exhaustive. And so I tend to be very suspicious. But I have to say that this was not the case. It's a comprehensive program and an academy full of knowledgeable people who guide students throughout their journey. And in that, I've found a great added value. So wholly believe in it. Of course, study, because the academy isn't out to sell signals. So the whole thing is not so simple and easy, but the price you have to pay is to study. But let's say, wow, that study is rewarded with great satisfaction. And then, hey, you take it easy. I mean, don't be in an excessive hurry to go live. At least that's been my way. So maybe try to take the time that you need and study all the theory as well. Also because I think that this is not a short-term investment. It's an investment for life. So starting a few months later doesn't do anything, but it increases the probability that it will work out.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Giuseppe, for taking the time, and I wish you happy trading.
Happy trading.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Giuseppe.
Grazie.